Thank you, Convener. No apologies have been submitted.
Any declarations of interest? And intimated. Moving on then to item 3. Minutes of the meeting of Wednesday, 20th October.
Agreed.
Again.
Agreed.
Moving on to item 4. Bernard.
Thank you, Convener. Julie Seidel the case officer for item 4 and will be presenting this item to members. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. This application relates to planning permission and principle for residential development at North Bank Farm in Bo'ness. The site is currently occupied by agricultural buildings and access is shown via the existing farm track off Boriston Road. An indicative site plan has been submitted showing 12 detached dwelling houses. Bernard, can you show the indicative site plan, please? This application is a resubmission of planning application P20-0219 PPP. Members will recall that this same development was refused by the Planning Committee on the 21st of September last year. This followed a call-in by Councillor McCluckie to look at the site in relation to the adjacent Miller Homes development. This resubmission has been called in by Councillor Kerr to allow the committee to understand the road situation, and members should note that there are no changes to the site or new material planning considerations which alter the recommendation since the last refusal of planning permission. The consultation responses are detailed in section 4 of the report. Members should note that there are a number of matters which require to be addressed. The Coal Authority request confirmation from the applicant's technical consultant that they remain satisfied that the boreholes provide sufficient information to demonstrate that Western Main coal had not been worked below the application site and do not pose a stability risk to development. Concerns are also raised in relation to the submitted drainage proposals, and additional work is required to demonstrate that an acceptable drainage scheme can be achieved at the site. Bernard, can you show the site photographs, please? The Roads Development Unit advised that the access should be a minimum of 9.5 metres wide. This comprises a 5.5 metre wide road and a 2 metre wide footpath to one side, and on the other side a 2 metre wide footpath for the first 15 metres with a 2 metre wide grass verge thereafter. The access road is currently a farm track and is shown as being a maximum of 6 metres wide on the submitted plans. Concerns are also raised in relation to the steep gradient of the road. 4 objectors have submitted letters to the Council as detailed in section 6 of the report. Objections are raised in relation to road safety, and members should join letters to the Council that they have been working with the applicant to ensure that the existing farm track is connected to the new road network and that both parties are working together. Bo'ness Community Council object to the application because the site is greenbelt land and not in the development plan for housing. The application is assessed as being contrary to the development plan. The policy assessment is detailed in section 7A of the report. The application site is countryside and greenbelt where the scale, siting and design of development as shown in the submitted plans is not considered to respect the rural character of the area. The proposed development would represent a dominating and visually prominent urban development which would have an unacceptable landscape and visual impact, and of specific note, the principle of housing development is not supported as the development does not comply with the housing in the countryside policy. Material planning considerations are detailed in section 7B of the report, and it's considered that there are no material planning considerations which would justify the proposed development contrary to the development plan in this instance. It's recommended that the Planning Committee refuse planning permission in principle. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Julie. The Councillor Kerr, you called the matter into committee. Do you want to say a few words?
Thanks, Convener. Julie, our communication left when it mentioned about the development next door, the Miller Homes, to some day with the road. I cut out and I didn't hear even just at that bit. Is there somebody looking to upgrade the road? I don't know if that's what he says or no. Before I ask the question, Convener.
Okay, is there anyone that can answer that just now?
Apologies for our connection issues this morning, Convener. The adjacent developer Miller Homes raised concerns about land ownership in relation to the plans that were originally submitted with this application. They've more recently contacted the council to say that they are working with the developer to ensure that the existing farm track will be connected into their new proposed road layout for the Miller Homes development. Right,
thanks. That was a key part of why I called in, because if I recall the last time, Convener, that this was brought to committee, there were concerns that it was premature because the development Miller Homes hadn't been agreed with the reporters, which that has now been settled. And the development that we're talking about is right next door, flat next door. I just think that at the moment it's an eyesore, and I'm sure if they would want something better than what's there. That's why it was most of the road that I called in for, Convener. So I'll wait to see what the rest of the members say, Convener. Thank you.
Okay. McCluskey.
Yes, I called this in the first time because how it related to the Miller Homes site that was passed by the reporter in the local plan. Now, at that time, the major concern or the major debate that day came in relation to the road, that obviously roads didn't feel, or the planners didn't feel that everything could be created, and it was compromised by the fact that the road access was shown in the local plan as part of the Miller Homes site and had been passed in that local plan. So now I see that the major issue has been resolved, because obviously planning has been established in the local plan for the road to be developed in conjunction with the Miller Homes site or this, and I see that communications have been obviously sought between owners and sites to take forward and do the road access that was a problem before. Now, so that has been clarified and addressed, according to obviously what Julie is saying. So that's good news on that front. When I asked the questions the last time about the fact that the relationship between the Miller Homes site, Julie did say at that time in a review that there was modifications going in to the local plan, and there may be some changes. Can you add to us, Julie, the fact is what is the result of potential suggested modifications in that? Have they been clarified?
Thank you. Just on your first point, this application site, including the farm track, is not part of the Miller Homes site, and there are no proposals to upgrade this road, increase the width of this road, or have any road improvements as part of the Miller Home application. In terms of the local plan modifications, I'm not sure what you're referring to. The local plan and the allocation and the policies would be the same as they were at the last time that we looked at this application.
I thank you for that, because I wasn't sure what you were leading to when you said that at the last planning meeting, but obviously I was just asking the questions if you could have expanded on it. But the road is, like you say, is a part of this application. However, what I'm saying is, in the red line boundary of, and you've got it in your report, it does show the road under the Miller Homes site as their application. So the principle of development on the road has been established. That's what I'm saying. Obviously, you've alluded to the development further up is no, and that would be the access. But obviously, I understand the significance. What I would like to say, convener, is that since this went through, obviously the local plan has been looked at and through council procedures. And one of the things I see for 9th of March, I noticed for minutes for the 9th of March executive, and it's written down that guidance which has been expanded to include development with an established building group in the countryside. Now, what I would say, and I would like to see more photographs of the buildings. I believe these are massive buildings, massive barns that at present take up the full footprint of the site. So this, to me, there's no mention of the fact that, as I say, when it states in the following minutes, and that's which stayed was passed in the March minutes by Falkirk Council, that to include development with an established building group. I would see that this would fit in that as a material consideration. I would also say that the fact that the Miller Homes is selling and got planning permission being agreed by all parties, that the area for housing, they're selling their houses, and the visual impact would be improved by that development, looking out on a development that is established for buildings here already over the years. I would also state that a very important thing now in planning, the carbon footprint would be improved by removing redundant or no longer purpose barns, huge barns, and replacing them with fit for purpose houses that fit the carbon footprint would be a positive in that area. If we didn't go and develop over the likes of Cairn Foundry and the BA and all the different foundries and previous work throughout the Falkirk area, when these places became redundant and not fit for purpose, then what would we do with that area? You know what I mean? The establishment of buildings have been passed in planning years ago for this building group. It's an established development, and they're only infilling on what is redundant buildings that would remain doing nothing in the future and be overseen by the development next door. So I would say the points. I would also say, and I note in it that if we pass, there's 3 different guidelines for planning gain for the obviously play equipment and such like, and the considerations. And obviously that's quite right. They should, a developer has to pay for open space development, but there are 3 different suggestions there that was contributed on amounts. But is there no some local play area going to be established in the Miller Home site? Because it says that obviously all the open space will be further away. But if Miller Homes, are they not creating any any play equipment on site that would be obviously getting used by the residents if this was passed. I do see that the other areas, you know, that further away would have to get contributions. But that was just it doesn't mention anything about, it just says that these three contribute Stromaker, Play Clark, Grimsdyke Playing Fields and Newton Park, Bowness, Community Woodland, and it's got amounts. Now, obviously, I've no problem with contributions going to these things, but I was just saying that if the play area that people were going to be using was, for example, on the Miller Home site, then would it need contributions at Drumacre? But that's just another point. But I'm happy to support this application. I was the last time. I like to be consistent, and obviously it's good news that the whatever the difference in opinion between the landowner and the adjacent site has been reached, and Miller Homes is happy to work with this developer. But I see this as reaching what we would see recommendations that within a Baldwin Greenbelt, however, where areas have had a principle for development in the past, right, huge industrial work here, that this should be supported and meet our planning objectives. So for the reasons stated, then I move grant for this application.
Okay, Julie, before I bring anyone else in, particularly someone to the second Councillor McCluskey's motion, is there anything you can add or clarify?
Perhaps just in terms of the fact that there's agricultural buildings on site at the moment, there is provision within the housing and the countryside policy to allow for steading development. This application does not accord with that criterion because it does not meet the guidance for that type of development. Development like that would need to retain a majority of the buildings on site. There would be a comprehensive design philosophy across the site, and it wouldn't be as we see here, which is an urban type of development, 12 large detached modern houses. So it does not accord with that criterion. In terms of the open space contributions, that audit is carried out in relation to current facilities, not facilities that may or may not be provided in the future.
Convener, if I'm happy to get the clarification that Julie has expressed, that it's to do with what's there at present, and I feel happy with that answer to the open space requirement, so I'm happy with that. However, she gave her interpretation of what material considerations is, and as I say, it's clearly in reading what was passed at the executive, and it says that to include development when the established building group. Could you put the photographs up, please, Bernard, to show that there is buildings here, and what type of massive buildings? I think there's a number of photos that the applicant sent in to showing the buildings. No, the road, the buildings.
Councillor, that's the buildings there that you can see.
But there was one when I downloaded it. It showed that the actual when I downloaded the application, there was one showing you a close up of the actual looking at the barns. No, that one. It was another one when I downloaded through the when it came up for development the first time. So it showed actual.
I don't have those photographs from the previous application to hand.
Right, well, as I say, if you download on the computer and you put in and you stick thingies, it comes up and shows you these massive barns and huge structures, and it gives you a thing that isn't just a couple of wee buildings. It's a huge cluster of massive buildings that takes up the entire footprint. So thanks very much. If you've not got the photographs, I'm sorry about that. Maybe I should have asked that they be pre-produced. But as always, we ask that full photographs and everything is included in our hangme to save going to sites. And as I say, it seems that there was photographs that's in the application, but you know, no here in front of us today. Right, thank you.
Okay, well, technically it wasn't, or they weren't in the application because there was a previous application. The fact that there's been minor changes to that application will give the members the opportunity to bring back the photographs as well as the other aspects of the report. We went with the previous report. Is there anyone else? Yeah,
Convener,
Councillor Murtagh.
thank you. I know that obviously Councillor McCluskey's motion hasn't been seconded yet, but if it is, I'll be minded to move an amendment to go with the officer's recommendations. I take a completely contrary point of view to what Councillor McCluskey is saying in terms of the character of the development and it being a kind of established site in terms of the way that the building is. It's an established agricultural building site. I think it's quite clear from the report and from the pictures as well that Bernard just put up that obviously there are a mix of dwelling type farm buildings and agricultural as you would expect, but this is not what is proposed as an urban type development in the countryside, and it's not a suitable development. I think for all the reasons that are outlined in the report, including point 3, which clearly says that it's not demonstrated to be suitable access for the road either, which is clear in the report recommendations. You know, I don't want to list the reasons, so I'd put an amendment because they're right there in the recommendations, so that I would put them as per the officer's recommendations. But I don't think at all that this is an infill development, or you know, I certainly would take issue with the idea that this will be an improvement to the carbon footprint of the site, because we don't know what else might come forward for you know, a more appropriate type development. I don't think this type of development is appropriate at all for this location. I don't think it accords with any of our policies as to greenbelt land, development in the countryside, infill development, or the kind of character that we would consider for this sort of development at all. I can see absolutely no reason whatsoever to be looking at any material consideration to grant it. And I would say, and maybe ask officers to clarify, because one of the things which I think has come up time and again is, although there is a permission, there may be a permission, and as was sort of related to in the open space discussion, that's no guarantee that will actually be built. You know, at any outstanding, you know, no matter what stage they're at, we cannot guarantee that situation. We have to judge every application, as I understand it, on the basis of what is currently there and currently the situation. So certainly taking that into consideration, if I'm correct in that interpretation, I really can't see any type of material consideration at all. So I would just move refusal as per officer's recommendations. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, we have a motion and an amendment, neither of which have been seconded yet. Can Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. Listening to both Councillor McCluskey and Councillor Murtagh, I'm sick that I didn't have a look at the pictures of the previous one to give a better understanding. I'd like to go and see the site to get a better understanding of exactly what the layout is compared to where the development next door, and how it looks, as in what Julie said regarding the overall site view of the site. I think it would be beneficial for us as a committee to get the full picture of how this development would look. I don't know if that would be possible, convener.
Convener, as always, listen to members of the community, and I've seen that the provost noted there and always take his kind of experience and in yourself, and like the last time. But I take a point there, and if a member, I think it would be highly beneficial to go out. Obviously, conditions could be made in the road and different, and these other things. But obviously, I think it would be highly beneficial to go out and see these massive buildings.
So, Mr.
Obviously,
McCluskey, actually, it's the third time I've let you in, so I think you're doing quite well here.
yes,
You will have the right to sum up, providing your motion is seconded.
I was
So,
going to withdraw, I was going to say that withdraw my motion, convener, and go to site and then discuss it at the next meeting. I mean, but I'm happy to go otherwise. But a councillor in this committee has asked to go to sites, and I'm saying that I'll not refuse any councillor on the committee. You've got the decision, but what I'm saying is I wouldn't like to refuse or give any councillor an opportunity, a site visit, if they desire one. That's
okay, here it is then.
all.
Councillor Bowes?
Thank you, convener. For myself, yeah, there's a couple of things, and I agree with Councillor Murtagh on the carbon footprint part. When you've got 10 houses, potentially 20 cars, the encompass carbon actually building them, the demolition costs and everything else, I don't think you can make an argument on this one based on the environmental side. I think probably one of the key things for me in reading this report is item 7B8. It is considered that the proposal development is not classed as sustainable development with specific reference to protecting green infrastructure, landscape and the wider environment, and avoiding overdevelopment and protection of the amenity and new development. It is considered there is no benefits of the development that would outweigh the adverse landscape, visual impact and rural area. On this basis, the application is not supported by the Scottish planning policy. This is in greenbelt land. It's quite clear in this case that it's in greenbelt land. That's not being argued. I don't know why seeing farm buildings is going to change it from being in greenbelt land, and therefore I'm happy to second Councillor Murtagh's motion. I don't think this one should be going ahead, and even if there was a building beside it, if it's still in greenbelt land, I would still be the same opinion. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we've got a motion to go to sites. The fact that the motion was withdrawn, the original motion was withdrawn. Does that mean that the amended motion becomes the amendment?
Thank you, convener. Yes, I think we have a motion by Councillor Murtagh, seconded by Councillor Bowes, which is to refuse the application per the officer recommendations. We have an amendment by Councillor Kerr, seconded by Councillor McCluskey, to go to a site visit. And convener, I think this is something that we've raised at some previous meetings, that sometimes a vote of a procedural matter against a substantive decision, i.e. to grant, not to grant, or going up against just simply a procedural matter such as a site visit, can sometimes be slightly difficult. So my suggestion would be in this occasion that it might be better to have a procedural decision taken on whether or not to have a site visit. So it would be a for a site visit or against a site visit. And if the decision was taken that there wouldn't be no site visit, that would essentially lead on to a substantive discussion on the item, which could lead into Councillor Murtagh's motion and then potentially a further amendment that could take place against that. So with your leave, I would suggest that that's the cleanest and most appropriate procedural approach.
I'm happy with that approach.
Thank you. So on that basis, what we would have is dealing, I think, first of all, to get the procedural matter dealt with up front. is, as I mentioned, a for or against vote on having a site visit. At the moment, we don't have a position of having hearings on site, but it's perfectly competent for the committee to visit the site to view its physical characteristics along with officers. Voting for would be to have the site visit, voting against would be not to have a site visit, and lead on to further consideration of the matter. So Councillor Alexander?
Against.
So was that for a site visit?
No, against.
Against. Thanks for clarifying. Thank you, Convener. Provost Buchanan.
For.
Councillor Blackwood.
For.
Councillor Bowes.
For the reasons already explained, against.
Councillor Hughes.
Against.
Councillor Kerr.
For.
Thank you. Councillor McHugh.
Against. Although the more cars travelling in that area is yet another affliction on our environment.
And Councillor McCluckie.
For the sake of it, as it's an established business, there'll be more diesel polluting tractors and other heavy buildings going up, and it would help our environment.
Thank you, Councillor McCluckie. Councillor Murtagh.
I am against going to sites because it will make no difference whatsoever.
And Councillor Nimmo.
Against.
And Karen, just to check, Councillor Nichols not in the meeting. Thank you. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 going to sites, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 against going to a site visit. So with that procedural matter out of the way, what we now have is a substantive motion by Councillor Murtagh, seconded by Councillor Bowes, which was to refuse the application per the recommendations, but it's now competent for a further amendment to be made to that motion, so it's available for the committee to discuss the matter further. Thank you, Convener.
Anything you want to add? Or go straight to the vote?
Convener, I'll move grant the application in line with my previous suggestion.
Yeah. Go seconder.
I'll second that, Convener.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Kerr. The anyone else? Yes.
Thank you, Convener. Just to note up the amendment that's proposed, I think what was being said is that the committee considered that a number of material considerations would be of such weight as to indicate that the development plan would not be afforded priority in these items where that it was satisfied that the location for development of this nature is acceptable in landscape effect and visual impact terms. The development would enhance the visual amenity of the area in terms of replacement development of the existing buildings. And it was also noted that it would improve the carbon footprint by removing redundant large agricultural buildings and replacing them with fit-for-purpose houses. Can I clarify with the mover and seconder of the amendment in relation to road access and development? I note that the third refusal reason is the applicant has not demonstrated that suitable access can be achieved to serve the residential development, which would accord with the National Road Development Guide, Scots 2004, as this would be a matter going against officer recommendations. It's important that we have reasons for that. So I was just wondering if there was perhaps a clearer view that we could establish on satisfaction or otherwise with the road access and track that would be available in terms of the application put before the committee.
Convener, if I may, I'm happy that a condition is made that the neighbouring developer has said that they'll work with the applicant and put in an established road. So I'm happy here condition that it meets the that your officers' recommendations.
Convener, with your leave, could I perhaps ask if I think we have some roads officers in attendance. Would you be able to perhaps run through the position in that regard and what the position would be in terms of perhaps a further application for detailed matters coming through and how that would operate with the road and what could be put in place in terms of the boundary per the application? Thank you, Convener.
Who's from Roads?
Convener, it's Craig Russell here. I'm representing Roads this morning.
Morning, Craig.
I'm not entirely clear what Mr. Henderson was referring to there. The report's pretty clear in representing our comments back to planning on this. We have concerns over the width of the access road, concerns over the gradient of the access road as well. I'm not clear at this point whether those could be resolved by way of a condition.
Okay. Pretty clear. And understand.
Thank you, Convener. It's Ian Henderson again. I don't know if the planning officers have any thoughts. I recall previously when this application before the committee, there was the so-called Grampian condition was part of an unsuccessful motion, which is a suspensive condition, which was agreed or considered appropriate at that point. Which effectively said that development would not commence until an enforceable mechanism had been achieved for appropriate provision of road infrastructure. I don't know if the planners have any comments around that in this context.
Just to come in on the point that I was raising there, in the light of the comments from Roads, the view is that there isn't sufficient room or land within the application site to achieve the standard of road that is sought by roads officers. If members were minded to grant permission, additional land would be required outside the application site in order to achieve a satisfactory standard of road access to the site. And as Mr. Henderson was mentioning, I think it's there are mechanisms within planning by the use of suspensive or negative planning conditions to secure development out with the applicant's ownership and control to try and do that. So I believe that's what Mr. Henderson was referring to as a possible way forward. If members were minded to grant permission, the suggestion would be that it should be subject to negative planning conditions requiring the submission and approval by the council of a roads layout that requires additional third-party land to secure access to the site. And I would suggest that if that were the route that members go down, that you'd wish to be satisfied that those road works were implemented before any occupation of any houses on the site. I hope that helps.
I hope so as well. Anyone questions on that or
Fine by me, Convener.
Right. That would be if the motion or amendment was accepted, Councillor McCluskey.
Yes.
I think it's the same matter for the vote.
To sum up for the motion, since it's now a motion.
Yes.
Just briefly, I think it's important because now we know what the motion and the amendment are. That that the additional fact that there is no current way within the from the roads point of view that the space or the gradient can be achieved within the current proposal, and that there would be these conditions. It is just yet another reason, but I cannot, and I'm not sure I understand how even the statement about carbon footprint being improved without being clarified and verified can even be included in the conditions. But I guess they can, as I trust Mr. Henderson. But yeah, I think we have to be really clear. I'm as I mentioned before, it makes me really concerned when we start to think about what we might do to completely overrule our local development plan and our planning policies based on the grant of an application that isn't yet built, and that's in the material considerations and in the minds of those in the committee when they're voting on something. That concerns me, and I think it's just a point I wanted to emphasise, that we, even if all these things had planning permission around them, that's not what we're judging it on. We have to judge it on what's actually there, because it might not actually be built. So I just wanted to make that point, because I think it seems to be part of the thinking of the amendment and what's been put forward, and I don't think it's I'm comfortable with it. Thanks, convener.
Thanks for that. Someone else point well made. The
Well made,
vote.
convener, but it was your executive that passed this development
Mr.
all right,
Mr.
and
McLaughlin.
established building.
Mr. McLaughlin.
I know,
the-
convener, thank you. Take the slam to this.
Sorry? Sorry, I missed that last comment. Okay. There's the vote.
You're on mute, John.
Thank you, convener. I'll just run over again the motion and amendment. So we now have a substantive motion, and the motion is by Councillor Murtagh, seconded by Councillor Bowes, and that is to refuse permission in accordance with the officer recommendations in the report. The amendment is by Councillor McCluckie, seconded by Councillor Kerr. And I will run through this, and please interrupt Councillor McCluckie and Kerr if you don't think I'm representing this appropriately. But the committee consider that the following material considerations are of such weight as to indicate that the development plan should not be afforded priority. And number one now, after the discussion that we've just had, is that the committee is satisfied that an enforceable mechanism could be achieved for appropriate provision of road infrastructure and road access in accordance with National Road Development Guide. Number two would be the committee is satisfied that the location for development of this nature is acceptable in terms of landscape effects and visual impact. Number three would be the development would enhance the visual amenity of the area in terms of replacement development of the existing buildings. Number four would be improve carbon footprint by removing redundant large agricultural buildings and replacing them with fit for purpose houses. It was acknowledged that there would be a requirement for a minded to grant decision as opposed to a straight grant. It would be minded to grant subject to the satisfactory conclusion of a Section 75 planning obligation, which would make provision for an education contribution towards Grange Primary School, open space provision and affordable housing provision. And after the Section 75 had been agreed, permission would be granted subject to conditions. One of these would be a Grampian suspensive or negative condition, as Mr. Whittle put it, to the effect that no development would commence until an enforceable mechanism had been put in place to secure the carrying out of roadworks to provide road infrastructure and road access in accordance with the National Road Development Guide. So I will call over members. Councillor Alexander.
Against the development and for the motion.
That's correct, Councillor Alexander. The motion was to refuse permission, and the amendment was to amended to grant amendment. So you would be voting for the motion, did I gather?
Yes, for the motion.
That's refusal of permission. Thank you. Provost Buchanan.
Motion.
Councillor Blackwood.
The motion.
Councillor Bowes.
Motion.
Councillor Hughes.
The motion.
Councillor Kerr.
Amendment.
Councillor McHugh.
For the motion.
Councillor McCluckie.
Amendment.
Councillor Murtagh.
For the motion.
Councillor Nichols. Absent. Councillor Nimmo.
Amendment.
Thank you. And I have noted 7 votes for the motion and 3 for the amendment, and the motion is duly carried. Thank you, convener.
Okay, thanks very much for that. The item 5 has a request for 2 deputations, one from the applicant and then one from objectors. Can we agree to hear the deputations?
Agreed.
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 Okay. Well, we'll bring the officers in next to explain the position of the department at this point in time, and then we'll have the objectors and then the applicant.
Thank you, convener. This proposal seeks to introduce a 2-storey side extension at 6 Hayworth Avenue in Lauriston. The application property is flanked by 8 Sandy Loan to the west and is bounded by Hayworth Avenue to the east with 5 Hayworth Avenue to the rear. The development would facilitate provision of an additional bedroom and living area at the application property. The proposed extension would be approximately 4 metres in width, 5.95 metres in depth, with an eaves height of 5.36 metres and a ridge height of 7.65 metres. The extension would be rough cast to match the existing dwelling house. Details of the consultations undertaken can be found in section 4 of the report. 2 public representations were submitted in relation to the proposals and can be found in section 6. The size, scale and design of the proposed extension would be large in relation to its location, particularly given that the proposal sits on a prominent corner plot. However, on balance, it is deemed this wouldn't be harmful to the street scene. There would be no additional harm to neighbours' living conditions through loss of privacy, as the additional first floor window to the rear elevation of the property is to be obscure glazed. While some overshadowing of the neighbouring property would occur, this has been assessed and is not deemed to be to a harmful extent, as the proposed development will not overshadow existing neighbouring windows. The proposal is considered to be acceptable development as it accords with the local development plan and relevant policies HC08 and PE05. There are no material considerations which would justify a recommendation to refuse this application. And Bernard's just showing some pictures here taken from Sandy Loan, which look towards the property, which is situated on the corner plot there.
Okay, who do I have for the Julie Steele? Julie, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good. Okay, well, the procedure is that you have 10 minutes to make your case to the committee, and after which we'll hear the objectors, and we'll hear the views of the neighbours. So if you want to lead on.
Yeah, sure. As it's stated in the plans, this house is on a corner plot, and the proposed 2-storey extension, the way the angle of the house directly looks into my garden and property. Now, the scale of this extension is huge. It's like a semi-detached house going to be on the corner of my house, which really it's going to block me into a dark corner. The way that the angle is of the house, it's not very clear in the picture, but this is, even though it's a side extension for where this property is, it actually is the front facing for Sandy Loan. So it looks outwards. So for my house, it projects outwards. So it's like an extension going in front of my house. Now it's really going to impact my privacy. When we walk up from my pathway, the front windows are going to be within 1 metre of my boundary, which is quite significant, which really is going to be really quite intrusive when I'm going up and down my pathway as well. Now, where the windows are, I know that the top window is going to be, I think that's a bathroom, but even the bottom windows look directly into my living room. I've got a bay window, it looks directly into my living room. And the height and scale of this is just absolutely significant. That's going to be on my family going in and out of the property. What I've done is, well, I've had a look, and
This property had a significant extension put on last year, which I was more than happy with, and that placed on my back garden. But to have the significant extension last year and now this massive semi-detached house, if you like, going on the side is going to hugely impact the front and side of my garden property. Now I've had a look as well. I know it's been approved at the moment, but with a two-storey building, the guidance in the Scottish guidance, it does say that it should be within 7 to 10 metres away. Now this is under 3 metres from my property. It's actually on the boundary line at some point. I'm within 3 metres of my property and bedroom and living room window, which is significant to us. It's going to block my daylight, the height of this, block the daylight that I have got at the side. Now the side pathway that I use is my primary access for me and my children, and that's going to be significantly darker and just a big, huge brick semi-detached house looking up and down when we go in and out of the access path, which is going to be really dark for us now. Also, there's 3 semi-detached houses on this street, and they look very, very similar, and this will just look really different with the mass scale of this extension towards the other 3 houses that sit on corner plots as well. It's going to make a big difference to surrounding properties, and it's next to the public footpath, and because it is on Sandalone, it's right on the road as well. So overall, for me as a family, it's having a significant impact on it's going to be overbearing, absolutely overbearing when we look out. No privacy at all into our windows, and overshadowing my daylight will be significantly decreased. And what it will be like, because my house is laid back, and this extension is coming out to the front of my property, it'll just feel like we're boxed in. And again, with the extension we've previously had, I want to make it quite apparent, I'm not against extensions, but there was 5 minute extensions last year, but this one is just going to be really, really significant for us as a family.
Okay, finish your presentation.
Yes, thank you.
Any other objectors? That's just this one. Okay, the applicant. Who's here for representing the applicant, or?
Yep.
Is who's here?
Yep, I'm here.
So what's your name?
It's Andrew Bogan.
Andrew Bogan. Hi, Andrew.
Hi
Same
there.
procedure. You have 10 minutes to make your case.
Okay. Firstly, thanks for the opportunity to address the committee. I'm really just going to reiterate what the plan officers looked at, but I really want to address some concerns that Julie's got. The intention of this extension is not to upset my neighbours. I've enjoyed a good 8 or 9 years here, and all of them have been relatively peaceful, so it's not my intention to invade on anybody's privacy or daylight for that matter. So I'll give you the reasons behind the extension first. 2 reasons essentially: the arrival of my first son. The second, that I think we can all agree with, was the COVID-19 pandemic. So because of this, my wife's been working from home for the NHS for the very beginning of the first lockdown we had, so I had to use one of our bedrooms as a makeshift office, and now with the little one arriving, space is at a premium in my house. Firstly, to deal with the privacy issue and overshadowing, the extension from the outset has been designed so that we're not going to be looking at the house. I mean, the back, as Julie's mentioned and Stuart has mentioned, will be obscured glazed. The side of the house is looking into their garden, the first floor, we've decided against any windows there to do away with it. And as Stuart's mentioned in his report, he's confirmed it's in compliance with the policy HC08 that deals with that. And to quote the plan report directly, in this instance, no unacceptable overshadowing or overlooking which would affect the daylight or privacy enjoyed by neighbouring properties was found as a result of the proposals when assessed using the guidance. So while it's acknowledged in his report that some overshadowing will occur, it's been assessed it's not deemed to be to a harmful extent. and proposed development is below the 25-degree line from the midpoint of the existing neighbouring windows. And another one with the daylight, the extension is actually going to be sited north of 8 standalone, so at no point during the day would this block any of the direct sunlight. And in actual fact, in the summer evenings, my house actually falls, my back garden falls into the shadow of 8 standalone, so I can't see the daylight being an issue from my perspective. But another one on the extension that we had last year, that's on the complete opposite side of the house from 8 standalone. This was completed under a building warrant, and at no point does it project to the rear of the house at all, and it's within the existing footprint of the house, so it goes out with the width of the garage in the back of the house. It was just filling in a corner. As far as the visual amenity goes, we have taken care to try and ensure the house looks to be in keeping with the current street scene of Hayworth Avenue. They are aging buildings, so we prefer to try and stay here and improve on what's here rather than just move to a bigger house elsewhere, because to be fair, I've stayed in Lauriston since birth, so I want to keep it that way. I want my son to go to the same school as me, so it's difficult to portray that in just a couple of drawings, but I can assure the panel that every care would be taken to ensure the house looks as close to the original as possible and to observe their privacy at all times. And again, referring to Stuart's plan report, he's deemed it would not be harmful to the street scene. In terms of the actual planning process, everything that's been asked of me, I have been happy to do. I actually hosted 8 volunteer archaeologists during Falkirk Archaeology Month because we sit on the Antnine Wall World Heritage Site. I invited Jeff Bailey to come and dig trenches in my back garden, found some shards of Roman vases and contributed to the history along that Roman frontier. Again, there was another objection. They're not here today, but they mentioned removing hedges. We've honestly no intentions of removing hedges as part of this extension. Our privacy is considered just as much as I have my neighbours. Again, if there's anything we can do to improve the privacy throughout the build, then fair enough. But at this point, I think we've ticked all the boxes when it comes to that. And at this point, I'd welcome any questions for the panel. I will do my best to answer them. Again, just want to reiterate, it's not my intentions to fall out with neighbours and cause grief to them. So I'd welcome any questions out to the floor.
Okay, thanks for that. Maybe I'll make some questions, but I'll hear the officers first. In terms of the application, if there's anything from officers, planning or roads. No. Okay, any questions for either the applicant or objectors? Councillor Blackwood?
Yeah, to the applicant, he mentioned no unacceptable overshadowing or overlooking which would affect the daylight or privacy enjoyed by neighbouring properties. The objector obviously didn't see it as unacceptable. So who's right and who's wrong here?
Ask his planners for their views on that.
Thank you, Convener. The application is assessed using guidance in SGO 3, which covers residential extensions. Through that guidance, we take a 25-degree line from the ridge point of any proposed extension, and whether it would cover 50% or more of habitable room windows in neighbouring properties. And in this case, that was found that that didn't occur. So as a result, it wouldn't be considered harmful overshadowing.
Sorry, can I just ask as well on what I mentioned previously on the Scottish Government website? It does state that a 2-storey build, the guidance is between 7 and 10 metres away from the neighbouring property. Has that been taken into account? Because this will be with under 3 metres of my property, a big 2-storey building.
The questions I'm looking for as part of the process legally bound is questions from the committee or officers at this stage. The opportunity for you to put your case forward has passed. But I'm quite happy to allow that question to stand at the moment, and if the planners want to answer that.
I believe the guidance that may be referred to there is the permitted development guidance, and that covers what would be allowed without the requirement for planning permission. This application has been brought forward obviously because it isn't covered by permitted development guidance, and that's the reason it was assessed by officers.
Okay, anyone else? Mr. Nimmo?
Yep, convener, thanks. I've been trying to get in from the very start, to be honest. I was the local member that called this application into the committee for the reasons that are stated at 2.1 on the paperwork today. And if I can refer you also to 6.1 on the next again page where it details the public representation, there's reasons given there as well. Just on the back of what Stuart was saying about the permitted development rights, Stuart, does the same distancing rules apply to what officers have considered as it does to the permitted development rights? That's my first question.
In the case of an application going through the full planning process, the distance requirements don't apply. As I previously stated, the permitted development guidance relates to what's allowed to be done under householder permitted development, so they wouldn't need an application for that, but we would assess it under the guidance as outlined in SGO3 residential extensions.
Right, okay. A second point, convener, there does seem to be some debate as to the visual impact of the proposed development and the impact on the street in general. If you look at page 38 at point 7b, point 9, it does stipulate that this proposal is large and on balance, this would not harm the visual amenity or the street scene. Now, the words, I think the words here, on balance, can you maybe explain your thinking behind that? What was the reasoning that you came up with that wording rather than just a view to grant?
I think with this particular application, as is detailed in the report, I do reference the fact that the proposal is quite large, particularly given that this is on quite a prominent corner plot. It's probably on the limit of what we would consider to be acceptable in this instance. I think any larger would likely be considered unacceptable, which is where the kind of imbalance term comes from, that having weighed up various different aspects of the application, that it would be considered acceptable in this instance.
Okay, thanks for that, Stuart. Convener, I'll leave it for the time being, but I may want to come back in and move something at a later date, having listened to the debate. Okay, thank you.
Surely. Councillor Hughes?
Yes, convener. On the back of Councillor Nimmo, I basically also was concerned in relation to the mass and the scale of the building. And although it says in 7b.2, it's not harmful to the street scene, and also Councillor Nimmo has pointed out 7b.9, I was just wondering, I mean, it's difficult to look at the picture where you've got 3 houses on the right hand side, all of the same size, not extended, and then we've got the applicant putting in his application, and it is clearly the size and the scale is larger than the other houses. And I was just looking at if I was standing outside the street and looking at that row of houses, I think I would be saying that it would appear to be out of step in relation to the other houses. And that was my concern.
in relation to the application. That was what I was thinking. So, although you've said on balance that it is in keeping with the visual amenity of the street, I'm not sure. I'm on balance at the moment. I'm not sure whether I accept the on balance view or whether it's basically out of step. So, how would you convince me that the house is actually in keeping with the rest of the street?
Yeah.
From a planning perspective, obviously.
Right, well, that qualifies it. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I can maybe answer some of that.
Yeah.
As previously stated, we assessed the proposals using Supplementary Guidance Note 03. It provides some detail around acceptable extensions, either rear or side, and in relation to the street scene. In this case, you'll note from the plans that the side extension is slightly smaller than the depth of the current property, and as such would have an ancillary relationship to the existing dwelling house. And based upon that and assessment of the street, it was deemed on balance to be acceptable. However, I appreciate that it's a difficult one to perhaps explain.
Thank you.
Councillor McKay. Have you hand up, Ella?
Yeah, thanks, convener. I really just wanted to request that we see the photographs again so we can get a clearer picture of the impact that this is going to have, because it definitely concerns me. I know the street well, and it's a very tight corner.
I agree, convener. Stuart just made a statement there, which was good, but if he'd made it combined with the photographs and the drawing as well, it would help.
So this picture is taken from Sandy Lone, looking towards, this is from the western viewpoint. You can see there the application property that Bernard's showing there, and 8 Sandy Lone is to the right there on the picture. If Bernard could perhaps scroll down through those pictures, there's a couple of different angles of the street scene as shown. So this is looking more from a kind of eastern viewpoint directly onto the front of the property at 6 Hayworth Avenue. And again, to the right there is 8 Sandy Lone. So these plans Bernard showing the proposed elevations. As you can see, the extension is slightly set in from the front and rear of the property. It's not the same depth as the existing property.
Yeah.
And again, just showing there that it's slightly stepped back from the front of the property and the rear of the property.
Satisfied? Anyone else have any questions or requests?
Just thinking it's stepped in, but Councillor McHugh here, but it's of the same height as the property.
Yes, that's correct.
That's the distance between the extension and the living room windows of the next door property.
So as you can see here, on the block plan on the left, you can see 8 Sandy Lane there and the application property and where the proposed side extension will come out to, and you can see the line there will not foul the view or the light of the front of the property at 8 Sandy Lane.
I'll disagree with that. It's projecting outwards to the front of my property, and therefore it will definitely.
Oh, sorry, but
Sorry.
again, we can't have a debate between the applicant and the objectors at this point. As if any members of the committee have any further questions. So what I mean was actually answered in terms of the distance between the living room windows and the extension.
I'm afraid, Convener, I'm not sure I have that information to hand.
Percentage then of the garden grounds has been taken by the extension.
I don't have that information to hand either, I'm afraid. Sorry, Convener.
I thought that would be pretty basic.
Convener,
Anyone else?
sorry, Convener, if it helps, I can maybe show the block plan again, which shows the scale of the extension and how much of the plot it takes up. That might assist you with that question.
Okay, thank you.
You can see, I'll just run my cursor over the extent of the plot of number 6. So that's the boundary between number 8 and number 6. Running around, that's the extent of the plot. And shown more lightly is the footprint of the extension, which I'm just going round with the cursor at the moment. So that's the whole of the plot and the extension in relation to the proportion of it. That maybe also gives an indication of the distance away from the extension to number 8. If you look at, by comparison, the driveway to number 6, which has, say, the footprint of cars, which I'm just hovering the cursor over now, that'll maybe give you an indication in relation to the distance between the two properties. So that's where I've got my cursor at the moment, is the footprint of a car, and that is the distance between the closest point of the proposed extension and the closest point of number 8. You'll see any windows or gable walls are further away. I hope that gives some indication for you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Blackwood?
No, it's Councillor McCluckie.
Sorry, no, I
Sorry.
didn't. Sorry, it wasn't me.
Sorry, Councillor Blackwood. Councillor McCluckie?
Thanks,
No,
Convener.
what you make mix me up with Councillor McCluckie, Convener.
I'll try to behave this time, Convener. I think the issue is because of normally when we get a corner property, it's in line with the other properties, although it's on a corner, like it's the same distance back from the road. And in this case, it's already sitting far more protruding. So that's the bit of concern that I've got. I think if it'd been in line and extension, it wouldn't have been so prevalent. But I do see here the concern for the size and scale. It's sitting further out front for the other building lines.
Councillor McCluckie?
Thanks, Convener. I've listened to the debate regarding this application this morning, and I like to think I've kept an open mind so far as to what's been said. However, I'm going to move refusal of this application based on the detrimental impact that this development will have on neighbouring properties. If I can refer you again to 6.1 on page 36 of the papers, with the details contained there, and I'll take any legal advice from Ian regarding any other wording that needs to be incorporated. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, any further advice required? Ian?
Thank you, Convener. I'm just cross-referring to 6.1, which refers to negative impact on visual amenity and appearance of the streetscape, loss of privacy and overlooking, loss of light and overshadowing. And I think it was already mentioned by Councillor Nimmo in relation to detrimental impact it would have on neighbouring properties. I wonder if the wording would be something along the lines of the proposed development would be contrary to policy HC08, residential extensions and alterations and supplementary guidance 03. I think Stuart and Bernard, are these the correct policy references? As its size, scale and design would be large in relation to its location and have an adverse impact on the visual amenity of the surrounding area and street scene, and would have an adverse impact on neighbouring properties in terms of overshadowing, overlooking, loss of light, something along these lines. Councillor Nimmo, would that sum up the points?
Ian, I'm quite happy with the formal words that you've just put forward. Thank you.
Okay, do we... Councillor McHugh, sorry.
Thanks, Convener. I agree with Councillor Nimmo in this occasion, and I'm happy to second his motion.
Okay, any other members wish to contribute to the discussion?
Mr. Alexander, could I be afforded a second question?
I'm sorry, I pulled the neighbour up for that. The process has the opportunity for you to contribute, but not throughout the debate. At the beginning of the debate, yes. But I'm afraid that that doesn't allow for continued debate through the process for yourself.
The objector was afforded one interruption. Could I be afforded the same, please?
On that basis, the objector was give a question, I think it was.
Yeah, I just refer to 7C.1. When assessed against the local guidance and plan policies, there is a statement in there that says there are no material considerations which would justify a recommendation to refuse this application. I've heard not one positive slant on improving the area or bringing the houses up to a more modern standard. The only things I've heard is the negative impact of the extension. Is there no consideration to improving the street or the view from Avenue?
That's what members are considering at the moment. Councillor Bowes?
Thank you, Convener. Wish I'd get in before Andrew, but we're looking at the angles that we're looking at here. I am quite comfortable with the officer's recommendations on this, and I would like to propose the amendment to accept, but as per the officer's recommendations. I might not get seconded, but just looking at the way the building lays out, it sits splayed at an angle, so therefore I don't think it has quite as bad an effect. But that's my own personal opinion. But as I say, I think it needs to go as an amendment because there is a motion. So I would like to put that amendment in, please.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that?
Convener, I'm happy to second. Councillor Blackwood.
Thanks very much, Councillor. We go to the vote if no one else has anything.
Convener, I had my hand up, but I know it's difficult to see. It's Councillor Murtagh here. Yeah, I mean, I think I can understand the point of view of the movers as well, and I think it is a difficult one. I think that the angle really complicates it, because I can understand where the objector's coming from in terms of the way that, because it's on that and because it's set further back as it goes around the corner, it would appear then to, from that side, kind of almost block out that view of that house as you come that way. So I do understand it, and I think if it had been on the other side, and then it really would have had you know, from a geographical point of view in terms of blocking the light, maybe a much more concerning difficulty. But I'm struggling with it because I can see both points of view here, and I think it is very difficult, because when you look at the report and you look at the policies, it's and we often find it's a matter of interpretation about what's over scale and what's in character with the streetscape. But I think this is a very difficult one to judge, because from what the officers are saying and the way that they've judged it against the policies, it doesn't impinge, and it doesn't overshadow, it doesn't block out light, you know, to the degree that would be assessed. But probably even with the situation, with the geography of it, you know, it's difficult. But I can see this, it will have a visual impact, but also that the applicant has you know, altered plans or you know, been cognizant of the plans of where they would site windows, etc., in order to kind of reflect in that situation. So I do think it's a difficult one for the committee, and that one where you could take either view. Probably where I'm sitting at the moment is I probably with the members of the amendment that I can't see this as significantly going to impact in a way that would override the policies, and I feel that it's a really difficult one, and apologise for kind of expressing that in that way, because I don't think it is as clear cut. But that's where I'm sitting at the moment, and I don't know whether there's any other clarity that can really be provided, if it's a matter of really our interpretation in some ways.
Yes, I think there's a number of us having similar thoughts. There's a application to determine. Anyone else wish to contribute before we divide? No. Okay, Ian.
Thank you, convener. In terms of summing up, we have a motion by Councillor Nimmo, which was seconded by Councillor McHugh, and that was to refuse permission, and it was on the basis of the wording I narrated earlier in the meeting. And we then have an amendment by Councillor Bowes, seconded by Councillor Blackwood, and that is to grant permission in accordance with the officer recommendations. So calling over members, Councillor Alexander.
Amendment.
Provost is absent. Councillor Blackwood.
Amendment.
Councillor Bowes.
Amendment.
Councillor Hughes.
The amendment.
Councillor Kerr.
The amendment.
Councillor McHugh.
The motion.
Councillor McCluckie.
Motion.
Councillor Murtagh.
The amendment.
And Councillor Nimmo.
Motion.
And we have 3 votes for the motion and 6 for the amendment, and the amendment is duly carried. Thank you, convener.
Okay, can I thank everyone for their contributions this morning, and look forward to future debates, discussions, and whatever. Okay, thank you very much, colleagues and members of the public and operators.